This is the new 2024 Porsche Cayenne S, and it's been significantly updated compared to last year's Cayenne. There's some changes on the outside, some changes on the inside. I'll show you all of that, but the big news comes to this Cayenne S model, which switches back to a V8 after the old one had a V6. Today, I'm going to show you all of it, and I'll thoroughly review this new 2024 Cayenne and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some great sales lately, like this C8 Corvette sold for $77,000, this fantastic Mazda RX-7 sold for just under $30,000, and this wonderful Porsche 911 GT2 brought $135,000. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. With daily auctions, great selection, and free listings, check it out at carsandbids.com. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the new 2024 Porsche Cayenne on the outside, where there's actually not all that much to talk about. There's a lot of new stuff with this car, and I'll get to it, but the exterior is largely similar to the previous Cayenne. It's really just an evolution. Some things have been sharpened, a few things have been modernized, but no major changes or crazy new design styling decisions here. In fact, the Cayenne's shape has been largely the same since the second generation model came out for the 2011 model year. There's just mostly been subtle tweaks and updates to it ever since, and that holds true with this latest model as well. The exterior, not many changes. But there is a big change under the hood for this model, the Cayenne S, which, like I said, has returned to a V8. The old version had a V6, but now we got a 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 back in the Cayenne S. This is a big surprise because most automakers are going to smaller engines for better emissions, fuel economy. Not the Cayenne S, bringing back the V8. This new V8 has 468 horsepower and 442 pound-feet of torque, which is an increase of 34 horsepower and 37 pound-feet compared to the outgoing Cayenne S. So, bigger engine, more power, more torque, and better acceleration. Porsche says 0 to 60 in the low to mid 4-second range, even though this is just the Cayenne S, not a higher model. Now, this 4-liter twin-turbo V8 will be familiar to a lot of people because it's in a lot of Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche Group products, but it's been revised in this new Cayenne. Porsche tells me it has a new intake, new valves, and a new exhaust, which sounds pretty good, although the car doesn't let you rev it high enough to really hear it, but either way, take a listen. Now, one other notable powertrain upgrade for the new Cayenne comes to the Turbo GT model, the highest performance version at the top of the lineup, and now has 650 horsepower, which is up about 20 horsepower compared to last year's version. That thing now does 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. It is a true super SUV. Now, Porsche hasn't really announced any other powertrain or lineup changes just yet, only for the S and the Turbo GT, but I assume there's more interesting stuff coming. And next up, we move inside the new Cayenne, where you'll find most of the major changes compared to last year's models, starting with the passenger screen. Okay, check this out. You ever been sitting in a Cayenne thinking to yourself, well, the driver has a gauge cluster screen and there's a screen in the center, but I don't have my own personal screen. Well, if you have, there's now a remedy because you do. It's about 11 inches. You can see it here over on the passenger side of the dashboard, and it's a touch screen that allows you to do a lot of different things. For one thing, various vehicle functions, just like you'd have in the center screen, but, well, now you can do them about 8 inches closer to the passenger side. So navigation, music, phone pairing, all that stuff can be done on this passenger screen if you don't want to have to reach to the central screen. In fact, this passenger screen even has a vehicle tab where you can see like the current speed and even a real-time G-forces meter as you're just sitting here riding along in the passenger seat. But there's more to it than just that. An actual practical application is you can watch stuff on it. There is a specific filter on this screen that allows the passenger to see it, but not the driver. You can see from the driver's angle, the screen is completely invisible. And that allows the passenger to stream video, watch stuff while you're driving along, just like rear seat passengers in cars have been able to do with rear entertainment systems. Now you can do it up front, and it's legal because the driver can't see it, as you can see. And next up, another important change for the new Cayenne is the location of the gear selector, which may not sound like a big deal, but it has some effects. They've moved it here to the right of the steering wheel, and as you can see, it's this little switch that comes out. You push down to go into drive, you push up to go into reverse. Park is a button there. This is the same gear selector in the latest 911, and Porsche's incorporated into the Cayenne and moved it away from the center console in order to free up space here in the center. And that means, well, two things. Number one, the climate controls are larger. They're closer to you, the front seat occupants, and they're larger, easier to press, easier to adjust compared to the outgoing Cayenne, where this space was being used by the gear selector. Now, interestingly, when you press buttons to adjust the climate control in the new Cayenne, they're on this electronic panel, and the whole panel kind of pushes. It's a little weird to get used to. They're not buttons, but it's also not a touchscreen. It's sort of this in-the-middle electronic panel situation that's kind of strange. More interesting in the center console, though, is the cubby directly above the climate controls. That contains the wireless cell phone charger. Not particularly interesting on its own, except it is air conditioned. So as your phone sits there and charges and it gets hot, well, this little cubby has a small amount of air conditioning to keep it cool as you're driving along, which is a pretty good idea. That wireless phone charger, by the way, newly standard on all Cayenne models for the 24 model year. And speaking of the climate controls, a second ago, an interesting thing is the climate vents, which have like a bar going across them instead of individual vent slats for moving up and down. It's kind of strange, but that's how it works in the center. On the side, same deal, but now the bar is vertical instead of slats. Never really seen this before, and it's a little bit of a quirk of the climate vents. And of course, in this area is the infotainment system right in the center, large screen, and it's a touch screen, and it works great. Very responsive, very easy to use. So many of these car touchscreens are becoming so good. They're basically all excellent, including this one. No real complaints. It's laid out well. Everything makes sense, intuitive, a very easy to use infotainment system. A couple of items worth noting with this screen. For one, I love that the backup camera swivels as you turn the wheel. You can see as I'm turning, the camera is swiveling in the direction I'm turning to show me what's over there. That's a lot better than a fixed camera like basically every other car has. But anyway, moving over to the driver's side of the interior, this is a new steering wheel that is borrowed from the latest Porsche 911, and it certainly adds a sporty touch inside this car. And I mean that sincerely. It's a sporty looking steering wheel, and it makes you feel, well, more performance-y driving your Cayenne. Now, one interesting thing, the drive mode dial on the steering wheel, that's been there in previous Cayennes, but now it's standard. In the past, you had to pay extra for a drive mode selector. It was an option, but now all new Cayenne models have a drive mode dial that you can choose from. That is interesting, but more interesting in this vicinity is the gauge cluster screen. You can see this curved screen behind the steering wheel, and it looks cool and modern, and it doesn't even have a hood over it like most cars. It's just out there looking futuristic. I joke, but this gauge cluster screen really does look cool, and it gives you an enormous amount of configurability. You can have the standard 5 gauges displayed, as you can see, like most vehicles, or you can adjust it to show, well, 3 gauges that you can choose, actually, or a map in the center if you want, or a driver assistance in the center, or a full screen map, or there's even a setting that basically lets you just show your speed in case you want to cancel everything out, enjoy a drive without all that information information coming to you. This is a good screen. It looks good, modern, cool, and it's got a lot of great configurability. Now, to the left of the steering wheel on the screen, you have the engine start-stop button, always placed on the left in Porsches as a historical nod to the famous Le Mans start. It's over there, and there's no spot to put a key. You just get a button because keyless access is now standard, meaning all new Cayenne models, you just leave the key in your pocket, walk up, grab the door handle, it automatically unlocks, and you push the button. No more sticking a key in anywhere. Standard on all. Now, if you've been paying attention, you've noticed that several features I've mentioned are newly standard for the 2024 Cayenne. The wireless cell phone charger, the drive mode dial, the keyless access feature, and there's more. You now have 20-inch wheels standard and LED headlights standard. There's a lot more standard stuff, but as you can imagine, it has come with a significant price increase. Specifically, the base model new Cayenne, not the S that I'm in, but the base entry-level model now starts at $80,500, including shipping, which is a $10,000 price increase over last year's model. 10 grand. This model, the Cayenne S, now starts at $97,300, including shipping, which is a $9,000 price increase over the outgoing model. So, more standard features. I mentioned more power, more torque, better acceleration, but you are paying a lot more too, a 10 grand price bump. And of course, that's only if you get the standard base model. You could also go hog wild like this particular build and get some crazy stuff. Specifically, this car has a green interior. Take a close look. These are green seats. Porsche calls it night green, and it also makes its way over to the door panels. It's green in here with gold trim, although Porsche calls that neodyme, and it's mixed in with some carbon fiber, as you can see on the door panels, but also on the dashboard. Green, neodyme, carbon fiber. I don't know what all of this stuff costs, but in my experience, personalization in the Porsche world means big money, and I suspect this car is a lot more expensive than its $97,300 base price would suggest. And next up, we move on to the back seat of the new Cayenne, which is also green, also night green back here. The seats, as you can see, but also the door panels. It carries on to the back, and you still have some of that neodyme and carbon fiber, just like you had up front as well. More importantly, the back seat is pretty roomy in this car. The Cayenne has been growing steadily over the years with each successive redesign, and this one legitimately pretty large. For a tall adult, I got headroom, I got legroom. You could easily use this as a family car. It's decent sized back here. Even if you needed to use the middle seat, you could. It's relatively wide, and little bump in the floorboard has been diminished, lessened, although it is still there. It'd be a little uncomfortable, but you could do it if you needed to in a pinch. Now, one other interesting middle seat quirk back here is the seat belt, which is on like this pedestal, and you can lift it up or down, and if nobody's in the middle, you could stick it in the down position, tuck it into the seat, and you don't have to look at it or slide across it. It's kind of neat to be able to have a little cubby for it. Now, other items worth noting back here, this particular Cayenne has 4-zone climate control, meaning rear passengers can set their own temperature to their perfectly desired liking. You can see the climate controls back here. You don't have that same touch panel that pushes in the front. It's just a usual touch screen, more traditional like you might expect. Now, below that, you have some power ports back here, a couple of USB-Cs, and a cigarette lighter style port you can plug into, or of course, you can use it as a cigarette lighter. Below that, you have an ashtray for rear seat passengers, although I find this to be kind of interesting because in front, there is no ashtray. The only one you get is this little cup holder ashtray that's Porsche branded. It comes with the car, but there's not one built into the car for front seat passengers. Fewer and fewer people are smoking, although apparently Porsche thinks you're more likely to smoke if you sit in the back. And finally, we move on to the cargo area in the new Cayenne. You pop open the tailgate and you can see the cargo area back here, which is frankly pretty standard in terms of sizing, shape, nothing really unusual or particularly interesting about it. A couple of notable features worth pointing out. For one, these little buttons over on the side of the car car and then arrows, you can press those to lower or raise the rear of the car. So if you have something really heavy back here, you push the lower button, the air suspension lowers it down so you can more easily get it inside. Of course, you can press the other way to raise it back up when you're done. You also have a little bit of storage under the floor. Lift this up, there's storage here. There's also a spare tire well, so I'm not sure which versions of these will have spares and which will have storage, but either one is good, I suppose. Now, it's also worth pointing out that this is the regular Cayenne SUV version, but there also will be a coupe model, which has sort of a sloppier rear roofline. The coupe is more expensive and intended to look better, cooler, more exciting and sporty, but of course that does rob a little bit of rear headroom and, more importantly, a little bit of cargo space. The regular SUV version is definitely a little more practical, although the coupe, I guess, is supposed to be cooler. All right, time to drive the new Cayenne S. Now, like I said, from the outside, doesn't really look all that new, but I can assure you it is in fact, well, quite new. There are a lot of upgrades here, and the Porsche people told me that a lot of automakers would call this a brand new model or a redesign. For Porsche, it's just a facelift. This is the third generation Cayenne, sort of the second version of it. Call it the third gen Cayenne 0.2. All right, the driving experience. So I've been driving this around all day, and I hate to say this, it sounds a little ridiculous, but it's been as long as I've driven a Cayenne S. Most of the time they send me the, whatever the hot new model is, the Turbo GT or the GTS or whatever, the Turbo. And so I haven't driven like a regular Cayenne S in so long. It's amazing to me how the performance has gotten to this level. 470 horsepower in just the Cayenne S. On the level of Cayennes, this isn't a very high version. You have the base model, then you have the S, then you have like the GTS, then the Turbo, then the Turbo S, the Turbo GT. I mean, this is pretty low in the totem pole, and yet 470 horsepower, 0 to 60 in low mid fours. I mean, this is a legitimately fast car. And so while I complain that pricing has been increased, and it has been increased significantly this year, performance is so big that, okay, so you can't, this is what a turbo cost only 10 years ago, sure, but it's also how a turbo performed 10 years ago, and you get a lot better tech than you used to before, and you get a passenger screen. Okay, so the cool thing about the Cayenne is, and has always been, that it kind of combines everything into one, which is to say that it's a performance car, and it's a luxury car, and it's a practical car, and it does all three of those things. And this new Cayenne, updated Cayenne, does all of those things better than ever before. It has incredible tech in here. I mean, the passenger screen, people are going to complain about, but it kind of makes sense that the passenger should have access to a screen where they can, stream, watch stuff like rear passengers do. So that goes in. That's a kind of a touch from the Taycan, and it's a nice new feature to have. But it's not just that. You also have just fantastic tech in the infotainment system, in the gauge cluster. Then you have this interior, which is just a nice place to be. These seats are tremendously comfortable and luxurious. They hold you in place very nicely. They're very supportive seats. They feel great. And it's just quiet in here. It's quiet and nice. One drawback I have noticed is the shutter from the auto start stop system. So that's the system that turns off at traffic lights and red lights to save fuel. I leave that on most of the time, which car enthusiasts consider sacrilege, but usually automakers now have gotten that to be pretty smooth. Not in this car. It still shudders more than you'd expect from a nice car like this. One thing I really love about this Cayenne is the way that it sounds. The S had gone from a V8 to a V6 in the previous model, and now it's back to a V8, and it just sounds so good now again. The S was a performance model, but they kind of got away from that with all these other versions, and so they figured they could just make the S a V6, nobody would care. Well, now it's back, and it has a rumble to it that just makes it feel cool. It makes it feel like a performance car. And the same is true for steering and handling. I've driven this car an unusual amount for one of my reviews, probably about 100 miles, and boy, does it steer. It's incredible to me. The steering and handling is like that of a good four-door sedan that's a performance model, like an AMG GT four-door or something like that. It is legitimately quick. The balance is fantastic. The steering responsiveness is fantastic. Both the steering and the handling are amazing in this car. This has gotten big. I mean, it's very rare that a car steers and handles like this and I can fit comfortably in the back seat. Usually it's one or the other. But this car, the steering is really, really impressive. Just very quick, very instantaneous. And the handling, the car just goes around corners, not a lot of body roll. You can really push it hard coming out with great confidence. It really offers a lot. It's the Porsche of SUVs, like it always has been. But now it's better than ever. It really is just a formula they've refined and honed fantastically over the years. There's very few bad things to say about this other than I just wish they would do a little bit more with the styling. Make it a little bit more fun and exciting when they change it, because it still looks, it's hard to tell the new Cayenne from the old one. And I think the new Toyota Prius has shown what a redesign can do. It can totally reinvigorate interest in a car. And I wish Porsche would do that a little bit more, take a little bit more risk. But otherwise, this is a great car, and there's almost nothing bad to say about it. But it's expensive. And so that's the new 2024 Porsche Cayenne S. The Cayenne has now been around for more than 20 years, and this is the best one yet, with some tweaks and updates designed to improve it, and the return of the V8. Most cars are going to smaller engines. This one is doing the opposite, which will surely please enthusiasts. Anyway, now it's time to give the new Cayenne S a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 67 out of 100, which places this Cayenne S here against some similar cars all the way at the top. That's no surprise because the Cayenne has always done well with the DougScore, since it's a fantastic combination of luxury, practicality, and tech, along with strong performance, daily and weekend categories. This new Cayenne S is tremendously expensive, but it also delivers in basically every way. It's fun, it's nice, it's practical, it's good looking. If you can afford it, what more could you want?